Hello, hello. Hi, Anthony. Welcome to the Symmetrical Podcast. How are you doing?
It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
It's an enormous pleasure to have you here. I'm really glad that we managed to schedule a time and record this. I wanted to talk to you about DAO tooling, the world of venture capital, but kind of start off with just getting more of your background. Like if you could tell us more about what you've done in the past and sort of how did you end up in the wonderful world of Web3?
Sure. So born in London, as you can probably tell by my accent, and the network effects of the city captured me post-graduation, and fell into the world of finance. I joined an activist hedge fund called Amber Capital, primarily doing fundamental analysis on European equities. Later got disenchanted, I would say, by developed markets and wanted to get some emerging market exposure, so joined an investment bank, primarily focusing on Southeast Asia and emerging markets. So it was kind of doing leveraged finance and structured finance between London, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Shanghai. Again, got a bit bored and frustrated with world of finance, and set up my own consulting business. I was advising family offices and VCs on investments, and also helping startups with fundraising and strategy. Being from London, I naturally came across Bitcoin in about 2012, 2013, because as you might know, London's pretty like party city. There's a party vibe to London, and I saw Silk Road. So I got Bitcoin in 2012, 2013, didn't really get involved with the industry, unfortunately, because I was like I don't want to say narrow-minded, but like I was the type of uni student. I was like hyper-focused on like I want to go into investment banking. And we can kind of talk about some career stuff later, but yeah, I was like super focused on my career and didn't really want to get distracted. I saw crypto as like another very exciting emerging technology alongside plant-based meat, electric vehicles, nuclear energy. And was just like, those are cool things, but it's not for me. So put it to one side until about 2020. At that time, I was running my strategy consulting company. And alongside that, I'd also founded a music production company. I'd done like a travel company, just like loads of like random business ventures, online hustles. And I'd always been very interested in technology, and I came across this intersection between NFTs, community tokens, DAOs, social tokens, and it kind of captured my imagination, to be honest. So I started joining some DAOs, like playing around with some NFT stuff, contributing to DAOs, and gradually started like winding down my consulting business and just working more and more with DAOs, to the point where I was like, okay, I just need to get like work in this space full time. So ended up getting a few job offers at like pretty like traditional companies, let's say, like exchanges like Coinbase, for example. But yeah, I wanted to do something a bit more fun, a bit more creative, and ended up joining Seed Club. Was one of the kind of earliest contributors there. And a few weeks into my time at Seed Club, I met Nima, who was one of the first investors in Seed Club, and we had the idea of launching Seed Club Ventures, which is essentially the kind of venture arm of Seed Club. So it's a distinct entity, separate organization, but also a DAO. So for folks who haven't heard of Seed Club is a DAO with a primarily kind of an accelerator component to it. Seed Club Ventures is also a DAO, primarily focused on investing into DAOs and DAO infrastructure. The idea that we had at the time, which bear in mind it's 2021, these kind of social DAOs are very much more nascent, and the projects coming through Seed Club's accelerator, like Cabin, Kraus House, people like yourselves, they had very lofty goals, lofty ambitions, exciting kind of projects to change the world, but many of them lacked the Web3 native infrastructure and tooling to actually go out and execute on those ideas. So the idea behind Seed Club Ventures was, well, as Seed Club, everyone who was building DAO infrastructure and DAO tooling was coming to Jess or someone else at Seed Club being like, hey, we're building this thing, like, would you be able to help us with gaining some traction, getting some users, i.e. like people in the cohort? Separately, like, would you be able to give us some product advice? Like, would you use us yourselves? And like, by the way, we're raising some capital as well. Like, would you be able to help us with our raise, or would you be able to invest yourself? So naturally, we decided to launch Seeker Ventures. The idea was we can capitalize some of these early projects, building DAO tooling like Guild, Coordinate. Those are kind of the 2021 era of DAO tools. We can help them with their products, and we can also introduce them to customers for their products in the form of the people coming through the accelerator and the broader Seed Club network. I mentioned Seeker Ventures was a DAO, so I'll also touch on kind of what that looks like. We have a very curated group of folks in the DAO. It's about 60 members. Some of the top crypto VCs in the world, like Dragonfly Capital, Delphi Digital, Multicoin Capital, and Distributor Global. We also have family offices, fund of funds. We have corporates like Gnosis, for example. And then about half of the DAO are individuals, kind of founders, CTOs, product people, DAO operators, and collectively we are, let's just say, operating what is traditionally like a venture company or an investment company. So when it comes to the investment side, you form a thesis, you source deals, you due diligence those deals. In our case, you vote on whether or not to invest in those deals collectively. And then if we make an investment, we collectively, support those portfolio projects as well. And since launching, we've made about 53 investments.
Cool. So it's sort of Seed Club Ventures was created as like the missing piece of the Seed Club puzzle when they do the acceleration, but there's always this sort of need for capital, and it seems like that's how it sort of started off.
For sure. I mean, I wouldn't say we were exclusively focused on projects coming through the Seed Club Accelerator. In fact, it was pretty much the flip side. Ben from Seed Club described us as the yin to Seed Club's yang. So, Seed Club was focused on accelerating the DAOs and the communities themselves. Meanwhile, we were focused on investing into the DAO infrastructure. And the idea was by investing in the infrastructure, the projects going through the accelerator would have better tools and infrastructure to actually go and execute on their mission. So it was kind of like trying to build a flywheel behind, the missing piece in the whole DAO loop. Like, you can't create a DAO without DAO infra, and then the DAO infra is never going to thrive without customers using them and kind of, iterating on their product. So yeah, that was the idea. Like, you really developed the ecosystem, and we started as an ecosystem fund. We've raised about $25 million of capital, 20 of deployable, and we've made about 53 investments, which, when you speak to like a traditional VC, it's usually a much more concentrated portfolio of like 20 or 30 projects. We've, slightly more, we've invested slightly more broadly than a typical VC, with the idea that, we want to really accelerate the ecosystem and grow the space. And we're not looking to kind of pick winners. We're looking to support everyone kind of going forward.
Okay, great. I'm curious, sort of, we're in a bear market, so a lot has changed from the sort of 2021 mania of just investors piling up capital into anything that sounds reasonably sound or well. But I'm curious, is like, how do you see the sort of landscape of Web3 investing and sort of evolving over the next few years? And do you have any sort of specific trends in mind that you're keeping an eye on?
Look, we've stayed very close to our roots. So Seed Club itself has a thesis around kind of, communities, and we share that idea very much. So, as more and more of the internet, or in fact, more and more of the world becomes digital, more and more of that digital activity moves on chain, we see, Web3 as an actual core component of the economy increasing, and we see DAOs, internet native organizations, meta labels, squads, whatever you want to call yourselves, these kind of increasingly on-chain organizations, taking more precedent. And we can kind of touch on this a bit more in depth, but like the reason I even got into crypto was many reasons. One of which was a slightly more academic one, studying the kind of history of organizations, and the study of kind of how economic activity had kind of moved around. My bachelor's in economics, studied some economic history. So, in the 1600s, we had the Age of Discovery. In the 1800s, we had the Industrial Revolution, and both of those technological shifts, evolutions, came with also their respective different type of human coordination structure, legal structure, which was the joint stock company in the 1600s and the LLC in the 1800s. And now that we are in, where we are today, 2023, we're about 40 years into the internet age, and meaningfully, like tech companies have really taken, or tech industry has really grown, specifically in the last 20 years. And like, we haven't really seen a meaningful change in the way that humans have been coordinating, organizing, and the legal structures through which they've been doing. So one of the things that really excited me about DAOs was, or like Web3 in general, but then specifically within the DAO space, was, okay, so now I can create an organization. So like more and more of the world is remote, when more and more of the world is distributed, more and more of the economic activity in the world is digital, and more of that activity is taking place in on-chain context. So now I can create an organization or a DAO in a number of clicks. Previously, I have to go to like an LLC office, create this company. I can then distribute the ownership of that company or that organization seamlessly, flexibly, dynamically, via tokens or any other kind of methodology. It's very easy, and I can collaborate quickly and get people incentivized all around the world, via smart contract. That was like that alone for me was like a step change improvement on like the previous organizational structures and ways of collaborating that we've become used to. And then there's so many other kind of things that being on chain and being a DAO facilitates. Not only can your ownership be flexibly distributed, you can also compensate contributors very flexibly, very creatively. You can create dynamic ways of doing so. I used to work in M&A in traditional finance. My M&A friends would be like, why is this so exciting? And I'm like, look, how do companies merge and kind of like collaborate? You need to have this, there's either a JV, there's an acquisition, it's like a complex legal process, there's a valuation. Well, in Web3, like you can have a token swap, you can find like very creative ways for companies to collaborate, and it doesn't need to be like this static, rigid like JV or acquisition takeover or something. And then you have the fact that like crypto is permissionless, anyone can see things, there's some transparency in these organizations. So many of those things, like the big unlocks for me, and the things that we continue to be excited about, specifically with respect to like open source communities and DAOs. So we're continuing to invest into that space. I think when it comes to specifically the DAO infrastructure and DAO tooling side, we can kind of think of that space evolving in 3 waves, possibly. So the first wave of DAO tools or DAO infrastructure projects were all-in-one, let's call them DAO tools. They kind of tried to be one platform that locked in a DAO into their ecosystem by providing everything that your DAO might require. And those, I'm not going to name names, but like, let's just say they were iterated upon. And I think that was between maybe like 2017 to 2020, maybe. And then 2020 to 2021, or maybe like 2022, we had this kind of like slightly more mix and match DAO tooling. And by the way, I just want to say the issue with those all-in-one DAO tools was that there was a compromise of integrations. They didn't actually facilitate the kind of dynamism that we see amongst the DAO tools today. You are locked into that platform, which is like a very Web 2 mindset of how you could kind of build a company and create value and build a moat around it. So like the next set of DAO tools, we can call them like mix and match DAO tools. They were like 2020, 2021-ish. Folks like Snapshot, Tally, Open Zeppelin. They were like a mixture between like off-chain and on-chain products. But they seem to compromise flexibility and agility mostly. And today, let's just say 2022, 2023 onwards, we're seeing an increasing number of DAO tools and DAO infrastructure projects building in a much more composable way. And that kind of enables DAO to be more agile, to be entirely on-chain, and kind of design their stack of DAO tools and DAO infrastructure according to their specific requirements. So, one of the things that we're excited generally about crypto is that it enables entirely new ways of human coordination, and we think that DAO tools and DAO infrastructure should take inspiration from that and be aware of the fact that entirely new ways of collaborating need entirely different sets of tools as well. So a DAO should be able to kind of mix and match according to their requirements. I'll pause there.
So yeah, very interesting. I think, from my perspective, it's like, from a very superficial way of looking at DAO tooling, it's super confusing. And I think you really touched upon this point of that there's a lot of these like earlier solutions where we're trying to solve all of the problems of DAO tooling. And that makes it even more confusing because there's just so much overlap. And you've got these companies kind of pitching to DAOs, and there's just so much overlap in what they do. It's really hard to pick the right one. But going with a much more composable solution and having projects that specialize in a very specific niche and integrating them in a tech stack is something that's definitely much more attractive, and I think much easier for these DAOs to be able to sort of wrap their head around it and sort of see the clear value there. Like, builders should focus on these one thing that they're building and just do the best possible experience with that. So like Snapshot with on-chain voting and things like that, instead of having like these half-baked solutions to creating this like large sort of super app or so.
It's also entirely counter to Web3 ethos. Like, building an all-in-one tool or a platform to like lock in users is just completely like opposite to the direction that we're all like, morally, ethically, the direction of the way the internet that we want the internet to go is like, that's just like counter to that. So we launched Seek Ventures with that specific thesis in mind. Like, we are not going to be investing in all-in-one DAO tools. That's not something we necessarily believe in. We want specific use cases, building something very specific, focused on something, and being composable, being, focusing on integrations. One of the first projects we have, I think actually it's our first investment, was Guild XYZ. And they are, very much leaders in the space. Subsequently, I think one of our next investments was Coordinape, and most recently, our last two investments actually were Hats Protocol and Joke DAO. So both still very much continuing this idea of, composable tooling, integrations. I believe every project I just mentioned is already an integration in place with one another. So the Seek Ventures portfolio are all very friendly.
That's great. That's the sort of Web3 collaboration, but you've really touched upon pretty much all of them except of one is something that I've already played around with and have experience. Like Guild personally, I think is a fantastic project, and I'm super excited for them introducing the sort of monetization flow. That's something that I felt was missing.
For sure. That's going to be really exciting. I'm hyped to see that.
I'm curious to just dive a little bit deeper, sort of, what do you think are the sort of current limitations of existing DAO tooling and infrastructure, and sort of how do you see builders address those in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we can kind of go slightly more meta and say, okay, well, what are the actual challenges of DAOs themselves, and then think about the DAO tooling side. So I can actually speak to our experience at Seek Ventures. Like, what are the challenges that I'm facing myself, and I'd also be interested to hear about the challenges that you guys at the Symmetrical are facing too. But one of them, which is one that we launched Seek Ventures in mind, was tragedy of the commons. Well-known phenomena within DAOs that kind of DAO leaders either don't share context for DAO members and contributors, or for those that kind of come after them as a new DAO leader, or they provide all this context and information, but their time is entirely consumed in doing so. So, at Seek Ventures, let's just say I'm meaningfully speaking to a bunch of entrepreneurs, really excited about a few, and I'm like really keen on making an investment. well, now I need to write up like, 5-page reports on each project and like explain it to the entire DAO for them to feel comfortable with us like allocating capital. That's a bit of an issue. And also the other kind of question that results is with the strategy of the commons is, do all DAO members and contributors really want to govern? Like, do they even want to have a say in governance? Are they okay just letting me like run with it? So that's one of the problems we see in DAOs. Another one is the free rider problem, where, and this is often problematic actually in investment DAOs or venture DAOs, which is DAO participants often receive a pro rata financial stake or return based on their capital contribution. And then once they've actually contributed to that capital, they're disincentivized or demotivated to actively participate in those DAOs. Which in our case is deal sourcing, deal due diligencing, portfolio support, and other things. So those are two problems. Another problem that we see in DAOs is generally just like coordination without structure. I think a DAO's dynamism, a DAO's transparency, a DAO's lack of hierarchy, which are things we're all excited about from time to time, are also its pitfalls. It's well known that contributors to DAO find them messy, they're frustrated, they kind of have information overload, they're going through loads of Discord channels, Notion pages, whatever, like, what's going on. And then there's often kind of a lack of clear leadership as well. Another problem that I really love to quote is Steve Jobs once said, like, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And this also applies to investing. And the idea is like contrarian thinking, contrarian product building, contrarian investments are often those that are the most successful. Steve Jobs is one of a kind. Many other investors, he was a contrarian inside of his organization and entirely in the world. And like that type of contrarian thinking, both on the investment side and then product building side, can be difficult to push through. And then also Vitalik has a post, I think a few months ago, maybe a year ago, called like DAOs are not corporations. And it basically speaks about how certain decisions should be made in a collective sense, and some people should, some shouldn't. And specifically, let's just say you and I share opposing opinions on a specific topic. Now, depending on what that decision is, you might benefit from compromising and then meeting in the middle, and then you might benefit from actually just deciding on going on one side or the other. And in a DAO context, let's say 100 people share entirely different opinions. Should they kind of reach some sort of consensus middle ground, or is it better to stimulate ideas at the edges? And what we find with product building or specifically investing is often it's like those ideas at the edges that are very much kind of the breakthrough ideas in the world, and reaching kind of a compromise often leaves you with a worse solution. So I've mentioned a bunch of issues with DAOs. Another thing is like legal and regulatory challenges. Another thing is like revenue and value accrual. We can kind of go on until we will go to sleep. But I think the whole point here is that DAOs are an emergent new way that humans are coordinating, and the DAO tools and the DAO infrastructure that we're seeing also need to accommodate for this entirely new way of coordinating as well. They can't lean on Web 2 or like just forget like Web 2, just like regular organizational ways of collaborating. We need to be creative in the ways that we're solving these problems. We can't kind of lean on previous ways. We need to think of entirely net new ways. So we've kind of had some ideas at Seek Our Ventures around that. Many of our portfolio projects are the embodiment of our ideas. Yeah.
So many good points that you touched on, especially when I'm sort of reflecting back on the symmetrical and thinking about like the issues we have. So sort of the tragedy of the commons is, there's a core team. We spent hours and hours of like thinking how to bring value to the community, how to bring value to the whole project, and finding the right way and not getting bogged down, and sort of not just being focused on sort of documenting what we're thinking, what we're building, like what are the next steps. I think something in that space would be incredibly interesting to find the right way to kind of share these thoughts, and like specifically like building these ideas at the edges. Is that the sort of approach that we have now? Is we try to be as open with the whole community when building things and like coming up with new initiatives and new ideas within the DAO, and then there's usually a problem with engagement. People, just because you have a voting right doesn't mean you're going to actually want to participate in, let's say, that pod or group. But the way we do it right now is like we find the people that are most interested and start jamming on these ideas, and we come back with, let's say, a finished business idea, and that's when we start presenting it and showing what's the value add to the whole community. That's kind of what we're doing. In terms of free rider problem and investment DAOs, I love that, and I think it's important to note that there is some experimentation in that space. You know, you've got Chain Forest playing around with sort of distributing carry to people that contribute. You've got Hydra Ventures where there's basically a sort of dilution at the very beginning of you entering the investment DAO, and sort of that's the kind of tax that's then redistributed as sweat equity to the members that actually do contribute. We're sort of yet to see how both of these models will pan out, but there's definitely some stuff happening there. And that's sort of the main problems that we have. One more thing that I feel that I would love to see is that, especially as a Gen Z audience, and we're really used to our mobile apps. Like, we're used to chat apps. We were born with like smartphones and WhatsApp, and back in the days like Facebook Messenger, and being able to coordinate a DAO, because just Discord is not good enough, through a sort of Telegram, and having a bot that allows you to vote and sort of integrates with your wallet and things like that. That's something that I've been looking for a lot lately, because that's just another thing, is we've seen this completely different level of engagement when we moved from Discord, which we only keep for official announcements now, just in case someone just didn't get onto our Telegram, but all of the conversations are actually happening on Telegram. I'm curious.
We're painting a bleak picture, right? But like DAOs do some things really well as well, so it's not all too bleak. And like, frankly, like, we're early. Like, a lot of people are experimenting, and that's the exciting thing about crypto as well. Like, it creates a very broad design space for experimentation. Protocol-based tools, especially like these integrations, composable tooling, like, it creates a very broad design space to actually go after and solve these problems. But like, forget the problems for a moment. Like, many DAOs are very successful. They've done incredible things. So like, it's not all too bleak.
Yeah, I think, you know, we really dived deep into it, you know, on a sort of zooming out. There's a lot of fantastic things happening, but these are also the problems that like every DAO builder has to think about. And I think you're one of the best people to talk about these. But I would love to hear, what is your bull case for DAOs, and sort of what type of DAOs do you think will be the most successful in the coming years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think like we can again go back to thinking about why people are excited about DAOs in the first place. So, you know, decentralized ownership, decentralized governance, these are exciting things because they align incentives, they enable people to equitably distribute value, they create some equality of opportunity. DAOs are also very malleable in the way that they can form. They can focus on different causes. Like I mentioned, you can create a DAO in a number of minutes. You can distribute ownership very easily. So these are kind of, you know, the features of a DAO translate to meaningful benefits as well. One of the other narratives that people got excited about with DAOs was the future of work. They're very global in nature. You know, they enable distributed working, remote working, asynchronous working. There's also this kind of freelance 2.0 idea that you kind of seamlessly move from one DAO to the other. But more specifically, you know, there's like an ownership economy element to it. And the organizations are transparent, they're non-hierarchical. And like I mentioned, there's like seamless onboarding and offboarding. So these are all some of the kind of the reasons people are excited about DAOs. I think the reason that many people are is scalable human coordination. So you can kind of effectively coordinate, you can effectively delegate authority, values can be very easily aligned, memes can be aligned. And with this in mind, you can kind of imagine charities, hedge funds, startups, all of these organizations could become DAOs, and that's less exciting than the more exciting thing that, DAOs enable this entirely new design space for, creating and coordinating as humans. I think I can give some examples about what DAOs are getting right. So, capital formation, everything from like one-off ephemeral use cases like Constitution DAO, who raised, I think, like $47 million to buy the US Constitution. Activist use cases like Ukraine DAO, they raised like $10 million for, I think, the war in Ukraine. Versus more like ongoing ecosystem development capital formation groups such as CCAR Ventures, who were formed to invest into DAO tooling and DAO infrastructure space. BitDAO, for example, similarly, Hydra Ventures, they raised capital and did so quite seamlessly to explore this idea of investment DAOs as well. We've seen revenue generation models be really interesting in DAOs. ENS DAO and Nouns DAO, for example, have demonstrated novel ways to consistently generate revenue and sustainably grow their treasuries. There's also this kind of idea around a financialized meme where Bitcoin is kind of digital gold, Ethereum's digital oil, FWB are kind of like culture makers. So I think, DAOs are very good at accruing a significant amount of financial capital and interest in proliferating their specific memes as quickly and effectively as possible. And very related to that is like community building. You guys yourselves have built a community around your DAO, Kraus House, who are kind of trying to buy an NBA basketball team. That would be very difficult to do as an individual, but like building a community around that vision, aligning people around it, and both via online and offline and on-chain and off-chain methods, content, media events, conferences, educational resources, etc. They've managed to build a hyper-engaged community on Web3 rails, and they are kind of now, I believe, in the running to start buying like NBA basketball teams, which is unimaginable. So those are kind of the reasons that myself and many others are excited about DAOs.
Great. And I would love to sort of hear, what do you see most recent, most promising new DAO tooling and infrastructure projects? I know we named a few.
The most two recent projects that we invested in was Joke DAO and Hats Protocol. Joke DAO is a bottoms up, it's a platform for bottoms up governance amongst for DAOs and DAO contributors. So members of the DAO can create a contest or create a race, and then Joke DAO can kind of flexibly issue a token or like airdrop a token to members of the DAO. That token can be used to vote on the decision that the DAO is trying to make. And because all of this is on chain, the decision can automatically be executed. The decision can have inherent reputation within it. The decision that is ultimately made and the voters can be compensated for making that decision and participating in governance. So it creates kind of a gamified opportunity for people to get involved in DAOs, and this is actually one of the things that I was excited about with DAOs in general, is this notion of kind of gamifying your kind of contributions to organizations. There's a really interesting piece by Packy McCormick called The Great Online Game, which I'd recommend everyone read, and I think Joke DAO very much touches on that thesis. Very related to that is Hats Protocol. Hats Protocol is a way for DAOs to effectively delegate authority in their DAO. It works via giving people NFTs called hats, and those hats can then enable people to have certain kind of rights within the DAO, for example. So if you have this specific hat, you will be able to sign on a Gnosis safe. If you have this certain hat, you will be able to kind of access certain documentation within their knowledge base, for example. And you can see, so these two projects have already integrated. You can see how let's just say we put a vote, or we put like a race on JokeDAO saying like who should become our next Gnosis signatory. And then the community vote on it. They say Anthony, they say Jacob, they say Erica, they say a bunch of other people. And then, the community has airdropped a token. Everyone votes on who should become the next Gnosis signer. You can create a condition such that whoever wins that vote would automatically be given a hat, an NFT, and then they would automatically become the signatory on that Gnosis safe. So, if you scale this up, you can see how the autonomous side of a DAO begins to actually become a reality. And you can also say that, if you do participate in this vote via JokeDAO, for example, you might receive, some rewards. You might even receive a hat yourself saying, hey, you're like an active participant in our DAO, and therefore we're going to give you like a prize or some different level of access within the DAO. So, there's a lot of creative ways and a broad design space for the ways that DAOs are going to be organizing. And I think this, latest phase of DAO tooling and DAO infrastructure are all kind of very composable. They enable this new kind of way of humans collaborating and coordinating. So that's what we're most excited about.
Great. I'd love for you to put on your investor hat right now and sort of, when you're looking at a project, what advice would you have for entrepreneurs who are looking to build new DAO tooling or infrastructure? What does an ideal Seed Club Ventures candidate have in terms of team, the tech, and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we're often looking at is actually the team itself, right? So we're primarily focused on pre-seed investments, often pre-product. We love to see a community focus. So, it's slightly contradictory for a company to kind of come to me and say, hey, we want to our path, or like a founder to come to me and say, oh, like our path to exit is an IPO or like an acquisition. Like we're primarily looking at projects that are looking to kind of progressively decentralize, launch a token, and have their community be involved. So we're really looking for like a community focus. We would love to see a technical co-founder at least, and have a very stellar founding team, specifically a founding team that are Web3 native. So something that we saw in the kind of 2021 bull market was a lot of Web2 founders kind of come into the space, and they didn't really understand many of the things that I've been talking about over the last hour or so. And so we're very focused on people that are very Web3 native. And finally, and possibly most importantly, we're looking at areas where C Club and C Club Ventures can be helpful. We don't just want to invest into like a DeFi project or, I don't know, a Web2 consumer company. Like, we want to invest into projects where we can help them with integrations, we can help them with partners, we can help them gain customers, where the rest of our portfolio can also make sense and be helpful. So that's a very big deal. I think when you're investing into DAO and DAO infrastructure, it's very important for your community and your users, and this also applies to Web2 startups, like your employees, everyone in the company, to understand what you're doing. So we're looking for founders and a team that are very clearly able to explain what they are, what have they realized? What's the unlock in their brain that no one else in the world has realized that they've realized, and then to be able to get customers, users, investors excited about it. So they need to be able to clearly and coherently explain these things, and I think that's very important in an emerging space where we're just thinking about things in a very different and new way. So clearly looking for like a key insight that other people haven't realized, and then a very strong ability to explain that insight in a kind of clear way.
Okay, perfect. What about advice for Gen Z aspiring to break into VC? It's this sort of, mystical world of VC, and there's a lot of sort of college seniors and people just starting their careers they really want to break into. What advice would you give them?
So, by the way, what is Gen Z? I don't actually know what age is the drop off. I don't actually know what it's defined as.
Well, we sort of have different terms. Like, we think of it in different ways. Like, we would consider some people that don't necessarily make the specific dates, but have a very much Gen Z mindset, a Gen Z. But to go by dates? The dates are anywhere between 1997, 1996 up until 2009. That's the sort of...
Okay, I don't qualify. Otherwise, I was going to give myself advice. Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I would go to fundamentals. Like, you asked me what advice would you give to Gen Zs looking to get into VC. I would say before you even kind of decide why you want to go into VC, let's just be a bit self-reflective and have like a broader psychological analysis of like, what you want to do in your life. So when I was at uni, thinking about these difficult questions, I kind of thought about in my career, or not even my career, my life, like what are the things that I really enjoy and why? So it doesn't need to be a professional thing. It could be something you do in sports, something you do in life, something you've done, while studying or early in your career. Is it kind of writing a report? Is it collaborating with your friends? Is it playing football? Is it going skiing? Is it cooking? What is it? But like, why are those things important? Is it the collaborative element of them? Was it the quantitative, the qualitative? Was it the research element of them? Like, what were the things that you did? And during doing those, where were the moments that you really felt excited and empowered? Having done that, I would then think about what are things that you're very good at and that you enjoy. And you can kind of create a matrix of things that you're good at or you're not good at, and then things that you enjoy and then you're not good, you don't enjoy. And then try and optimize for the box, which is the overlap of things that you enjoy and then things that you're also good at. So kind of, that's kind of thinking about the market side of things. And then I would also think about, what are the real values that you have with your career? Is it working with a diverse range of people? Is it working in a small team, a big team? Do you want to be fully remote? What kind of salary expectations do you have? Do you want ownership in the company? Do you not want ownership in the company? Do you want to be doing a lot of reading, a lot of writing? Do you want to be doing a lot of messaging? Do you want to do a lot of analysis? Like what are the types of things that you want to be doing? And then with all this in mind, like what's most important to you? After that, I would kind of really try and double down on everything I've said. So like identify the areas that you really enjoy, that you're really good at, double down on your strengths and try and find things that are aligned with your values as well. I'd also take an approach of, while trying to optimize for all those things, the thing that I've tried to optimize as much as possible during my 20s is learning as much as possible, as quickly as possible. So putting yourself in a position to be on an extremely steep learning curve, I think is very important. And if that means joining a company and leaving 6 months later or 12 months, 12 months later, or starting a startup, like going all in, like balls to the wall crazy, and then just like ditching it 6 to 12 months later to try something else. Like I believe that continuously staying on a steep learning curve is very important. And you can achieve that by staying at like one organization for 10 years as well. Or you can go and pick and choose and just move around really quickly and iterate. But as long as you're just really focusing on optimizing learning in your kind of like Gen Z phase or your kind of 20s, I think that's really important. Specifically, if all of that analysis leads you to think that, VC is the space, VC is a very bloated term as well. Like, are we talking about pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B? Is it an industry thing? Is it industry agnostic? Who are the types of people that you want to be working with in that VC? What type of VC is it? Is it, think about what a VC is. Like, some VCs are very value additive. Some of them are slightly more kind of like purely a financial organization. They're just purely making financial investments. What side of the VC table do you want to be sitting at? Do you want to be slightly more of an ecosystem VC or a very kind of, hands-on, lead venture investor? So I would kind of do a bit of analysis on where in the kind of venture landscape that you want to be. And after you've done this self-reflective exercise, I really believe in kind of self-manifestation. So if you continue to wake up every day and you're very clear on what you're good at, what you're not good at, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what you want out of life, what your values are, and like where you want to be in VC. If you just go around like telling everyone in your network, this is what I want, and being very specific and just blocking out everything in your life that doesn't lead you there, I'm very confident that in the next 12 months you'll land your like top favorite VC role. And yeah, if anyone wants to hit me up, I'm very happy to give you some more specific advice.
That was amazing. I think that was basically free coaching from Anthony. I love that. And I'd love for you to kind of speak to some of our DAO members that are interested in VC. I think there's a lot of alpha here. And this is I think you've got this amazing talent. You know, on many occasions when we spoke about things and brainstormed, you have a very methodical approach to life. And I absolutely love that. I'm sort of much more chaotic, and this kind of brings me down to establish the next steps for these like grand goals.
That's very kind of you. I really appreciate it. But I must say, if you saw me on a day-to-day basis, if you see me after I wake up, you'll notice the real chaos behind all of this. It's all fake. But yeah, to be honest, that methodical way of thinking, the analytical, the kind of the way I communicate, the way I think, it's like that was something I noticed about myself. That's something I wanted to double down on and strengthen. And that's one of the reasons that I thought a career initially as an investor at a hedge fund would enable me to grow in. So I wasn't always like this. It's something I've consciously been aware of and tried to improve around. And I do believe in identifying your natural strengths and trying to deliberately, grow in the area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciate the kind words as well. Thank you.
So much alpha there. I think just before we wrap up, I'd like to go through the last quick fire section, which is called genZ trend check, to see whether, it's not just the age, it's the mentality and the sort of behaviors that you might or might not have. And my first question is, do you have a favorite trend on TikTok or Instagram Reels, if you're a boomer, as you say?
Yeah, I'm a self-proclaimed boomer. I'm actually, I think, the youngest member of Seeker Ventures, and many people in our DAO call me a boomer as well. So I do a lot of martial arts. I've trained Thai kickboxing or Muay Thai since about 2016. So every time I go on either Instagram or TikTok, my whole reel is basically people fighting. So that would be the thing that I'm most engaged with on social media.
All right, that's fantastic.
It's very deep rabbit hole, by the way. Like you see like insane stuff, videos from like Southeast Asia, all the way to the West, just like insane, like people kicking down trees, like nutrition programs, like triple backflips. There's a lot of depth to the Muay Thai section of Instagram and TikTok.
Incredible. So you're Muay Thai. I've actually been doing wrestling for a year and a half.
Wow.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and what is your favorite Gen Z phrase?
I don't know if I have one. I don't know what. I don't know. I've got no idea. What would a Gen Z say?
Yeah, there's all sorts of things like no capital letters when writing, or cap, or Riz.
Oh, so like, yeah. I would say the no capital letters thing is something I very frequently notice. Let's roll with that one.
Yeah, we actually sort of I get really lectured by Erica quite a lot about. Sometimes I forget that I put in a capital letter, but this doesn't just go with the symmetricals Twitter culture. So sometimes
I'm a boomer. I write in like formal English most of the time, so it doesn't work with me.
Yeah, okay. And lastly, what is the ultimate Gen Z artifact for you? Even if you're not Gen Z, these generations, the sort of items.
So this is something that's been produced since 1997. Is that what is the Gen Z?
Yeah, it's something that...
iPhone.
iPhone's a good one. Yeah, definitely.
I mentioned Steve Jobs earlier. I need to do homage to the man himself. iPhone.
Absolutely. Great. Well, this was fantastic, Anthony. You've touched up on so many points. And I think, the most important thing with this was really demystifying the DAO tooling space. I still have a feeling that there should be more content around DAO tooling, because just explaining in human language, sort of comparing all of these projects. But I love the sort of flow of how the thinking of DAO tool builders in DAO tooling, how it has changed from a sort of one solution that solves all of your problems to this much more composable approach, and to these really exciting new experiments like Joke DAO that we're a big fan of. We've also experimented with. So this was a very invaluable lesson in DAO tooling, and also some great advice for Gen Z. So thank you very much for coming, and I'm hoping to speak to you soon again.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, a lot of fun, and yeah, thanks guys for having me.